week, we began with our foundational truth of Ephesians 4:14 and 15, where we're told that we can grow through all the things that we're going through, that we can use the things around us and not be tossed to and fro, that we can stand firm and that we can grow through that. We began with what I consider our foundational topic, which is growing in the knowledge of God. Everything else feeds on that. Everything else builds on that. Because as we grow in the knowledge of God, then we see the image of to whom we are trying to be like. And I don't know about you all, but I have found that in my growing of the knowledge of God, that God will put me in situations where I experience something within me that I know only God can do. He gives me confidence, he gives me courage, he gives me peace, and I see things in me that I know that just have an awareness of God in my life. Even talking with our little princess girls last night, our study that are for our younger girls from 5 to 11. You know, they talk about the more I know about God, the more confidence I have, the less fear I have. And so it's the same thing in all of us. No matter what our age or no matter what our denomination or our address or what state, we have women from so many states on here today. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go into week 2, growing in influence. Growing in influence. John Maxwell has a statistic from a sociologist, and it says that even the most introverted individuals among us will influence at least 10,000 people during his or her lifetime. In other words, everyone influences sometimes. Even when we are quiet and we don't say a word, we are influencing someone in some way. And so what is influence? Influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, the development, or the behavior of someone. Ladies, that's intense to think that the way we present ourselves, the words that we say, our body language, what we do, what we don't say, truly is influencing someone's character, their development, and the behavior. So today, let's dive into growing in our influence, and let's think about what our influence is and how we want to grow in what's going on around us in the influence that we truly know that Christ wants to portray in us. Psalm 71:21 talks about how we can grow our influence. 2 Corinthians 10:15 says that we don't boast in what others are doing or the labor of others, but that our hope and our faith increases as the areas of our influence among people are greatly enlarged. That's in the English Standard Version. 1 Chronicles 4:9 through 10, we know the prayer of Jabez. It's a short prayer where Jabez prays for his influence to be enlarged. Oh Lord, bless me and expand my territory. So we have the scriptural principles that our influence can be greater. It can be expanded. And I know as I go back through the scriptures that people's influence grows the greatest when they're going through really hard times. Would anybody say amen to that? Don't you agree that it's like when you're going through hard times? I know that when it was my hardest times is when this ministry began. It was during my hardest times when I felt like I was going down for the last time that I began to look around for women who I saw as women of influence, those that I wanted to look like. I began to look at women and I would see who I wanted this person's peace. I wanted this person's joy. I wanted this person's knowledge. And I began to look at them. They had no idea that I was seeking out women that I wanted to be like. And you have no idea how many people are looking at you going, I want to be like her. Because the enemy is always making us feel like we're less than, and we can't, and we have no influence, because we're always just thinking about what we do wrong. But other people are seeing what you're doing right. And God is beginning to expand our influence, and we want him to. because this world needs to be a whole lot more like who you are. A person of influence. This is such good news right here to me. As we grow our influence, and as a matter of fact, over the next 9 weeks or 8 weeks now, as we talk about these different attributes, this is going to, if you're like me, this is going to make you feel really, really good. Because all of these things, the knowledge of God, the growing in influence, what is so wonderful about this is that it's all applicable to each and every one of us. These attributes do not require a special gifting. They do not require a special IQ. They don't require specific education or even a unique personality. So many times we think, well, I'm too quiet or I'm too this. I can't really be a person of influence. It doesn't. This is what's so amazing, is on the things that really matter to God and who he wants us to become and the things that he wants us to do. He makes it to where we can all achieve it. These attributes that we're talking about are available to anyone and every one of us who decide to be intentional in developing them and walking in the ways that God would want us to do. God has a unique way of taking away all of our excuses, doesn't he? He has a very unique way because he makes it to where it's more about him doing the work through us as we present ourselves to him. So many of us might be thinking, well, if I lived here, I could be a greater person of influence. Or if I had done this, I might have a greater sphere of influence. Or gosh, just little old me, there's no way. I mean, I don't know if any of you all have always started thinking about that. It's just like, I just don't know. Well, I will take you back and I'll challenge you to read this in your homework this week in the book of Esther. Esther, a woman who became such a woman of influence. But do you know how she started? Most of you do. Just a lowly, and that's how they describe her. It shouldn't be, but that I'm just using the words that many theologians would describe her as, a lowly, orphaned little girl. She had no place. She had no credentials. She was just an orphan girl growing up against what? Listen to this. The backdrop of turbulent political times. Sound familiar? Yeah. So much unrest, so much going on. But what happened in Esther was her heart started to hurt and bleed for those people around her that needed someone to take a stand, that needed someone to be a person of influence. And there she was, the least among them all. And many times we feel that way. Many times the old enemy will try to make us feel the least among them all. But if you're feeling that way, then that may be great news today, because God has a way of choosing those of such humble hearts that feel the least. As a matter of fact, he will choose the least and make them the greatest. That's what his word says. But this little orphan girl refused to just sit by and just try to get through what she saw the world going through, her world going through. And instead of just trying to get through, she did begin to grow through. And she began to look out to God and just say, what's my next step? What can I do? And step by step by step, friends, this little lowly orphan girl became the queen. She took her stand and allowed her courage and her obedience to grow her influence in the midst of everything that she and her world were going through. And she became the queen of great influence. And she literally saved the Jewish people from the nation from annihilation, one step at a time. You don't know what's in you. You don't know the power that God can come in and use us to save the family, to save a marriage, to bring back those teenage kids and adult kids back into the knowledge of Christ. You probably have an idea of what you would like to see your influence do, but we don't have a clue of what God can really do with it. Some of you are business owners and you want to see all your employees come into the knowledge of God. God is saying, start here. You may feel lonely, you may feel like it's impossible, but he's saying, start here, start today. Yesterday I posted something, I can't remember what it was. It says either one day or day one. I love that. One day or day one. This could be day one of growing. All of you are such incredible women of influence, but I believe that we haven't even tapped in to what God truly wants to do through us, because it's infinite. How could we? We serve an infinite God who says that he wants to pour his power within us to do things greater than what we could ever imagine. It starts with our influence. We have to be women of influence to be able to be used to change the character of those around us. Listen to this. To grow our influence, we must first know that we are a person of influence. To grow it, you have to first know that you have it in you. And then when we know that we are a person of influence, that will guard our words as we understand that they are guiding someone's life. I woke up with that a couple mornings ago, about 4 o'clock in the morning. I woke up to that statement ringing through my ears, and I wrote it down real quick. And of course, Lee was going, "What are you doing? Why are you up?" And I said, "You've got to hear this." Well, he wasn't so impressed at 4 in the morning. About 9 o'clock, he was more impressed. But I love that, because so many times we don't realize that we are a person of influence. But when you begin to think, I remember when I was in Augusta one time, I was riding, it was our newly elected mayor and his wife, and we were going somewhere to a speaking engagement, and someone in the car with us, he had missed the turn, and someone in the car said, "Oh, just make a U-turn right here." And he looked and goes, "Are you kidding? I'm the mayor of the city. I can't let people see me doing things like that." See, he knew he was a person of influence. I'll never forget that. I've used that with my boys so many times. He knew that his actions were being watched and they were influencing other people's behavior. When we know we're a person of influence, it guards us. And we remember that we are that influence. So quickly, I'm going to give you some ingredients to influence. Some things that we can look at and talk about today. 5 things, and I'm going to go through them very quickly. 5 things that are ingredients to grow our influence. Biblically speaking, that is. 1, being trustworthy. To grow our influence, people have to know that they can trust us, that we are we consistently stick to our words, and we operate from a place of integrity. The people on the ministry board and people who I work with, and if you're very close to me in training and stuff, they all know that I have made it a promise to God and myself and to everyone else around me that when we're talking about issues and things, that I will never say anything about anybody or any situation unless I would be comfortable with the world playing it on Facebook and everyone hearing what I say. And I really try to stick to that, because I want people to know that if you come to me and talk to me, and why? Because I feel like I failed at that in the past, and I know what it feels like to fail. And even when you don't mean to, and you think, I let that slip. I know I felt that years ago, and I know that pain of letting someone down. And I promised myself then, many years ago, this will never happen again. And I asked God to help me with that, to be a person of integrity. I have secrets that I will go to my death with, of people's hurts and the way that they just needed an outlet. And I want you to know that if you ever have anything to say to me, this girl, it will go to my grave. I want to be that, but I have to rely on God to help me to be that. 2, second ingredient to be a person of influence is that we have to be vulnerable. I don't know about you, but I trust someone so much more when they don't look so perfect and polished all the time. I don't know. I don't know. I just need people to be vulnerable. I need them to go first sometimes, to have the courage to share that they struggle and that life is hard for them, and that they have to battle their weaknesses sometimes. Someone who shows up entirely as they are. I remember that when I was girls, ladies, it's funny. The older women, I want to say girls, and the younger girls, I want to say young ladies. It's so whatever I call you, just know it's in love. But I remember when God was first calling me out to just be me, which was scary. 20 some years ago, I was like, I don't even know who I am. How in the world? All I knew was the stack of mistakes that I'd made in my life. All I knew was all the things that had gone wrong. And it was like God was calling me to vulnerability. It's like, who wants to hear that stuff? And I can remember the first person that I heard speak after that, and her name was Carmen Pate, and you all heard me. My first mentor is still a good friend now. But she came in to speak at a conference that actually I'd organized, and she just kind of floated onto the stage in all of her perfection. And she was a TV personality, so she was in a Christian arena, so she was so used to being so polished. And I remember she floated out in her perfect little designer outfit, her perfect little shoes, and her perfect little hair, and her perfect little makeup. And you know what my thought was? I thought, oh, another perfect Christian. Is there not one Christian like me that's not perfect? I was just like, please, Lord, I just want somebody that I can relate to. And when she walked out, she stood behind that podium, and she stood there with such poise. And she looked out at all of us, and she said, I have just failed at my 4th marriage, and I have suffered 3 abortions. She said, now that I've just knocked myself off of the pedestal that you all have placed me on, let's talk about what Jesus can do in your life. Oh my gosh. I remember thinking, I want to be just like that. I want to be able to speak my truth without shame, guilt, or regret, because I know I have a Heavenly Father who loves me and who has forgiven me. That was day one for me, I have to tell you. I admired that vulnerability. I admired, and I still do. I think the world is tired of people who look polished and feel like we always have the right answer. Let's just be vulnerable. Let's share our strengths. We have lots of strengths, but in your group time, the vulnerability. So ingredients of influence: trustworthiness, vulnerability. 3, humility, being humble. A person who communicates openly but does not lead with a list of achievements. And I'll tell y'all a secret. Karen knows this and Jen knows this. I was asked to do something, and there were about 10 of us. I'm not going to tell you where, when, but I will tell you what, they started sending in their bios. You all. I mean, these girls had some bios. They had done everything. They were like accomplished. It was amazing. I host this TV show, and I host this, and I do this, and I have this, and I went, oh. And I went to bed that night thinking, what am I, it's like, I don't want to, Lord, it just didn't, I don't know, something about it just didn't seem. So you know how my bio starts? Kim loves Jesus, and she wants to use her platforms so that you can find out how much Jesus loves you. It doesn't matter what we've accomplished or haven't accomplished. What matters is, are we leading people to the Lord? That's just my view of it. That's how I want to be remembered. When I die and you walk by and you see my dash, I just hope someone put on there, she danced for Jesus. She just lived for him. I can't imagine a greater achievement, quite honestly. I can't think of a better thing to proclaim. I really can't. I know that there are lots of achievements out there, but aren't those just the platforms to proclaim who God is in our lives? Aren't those just to be used to show that God took us and allowed us to maybe be on a TV show or to speak at have kids or whatever? Isn't it enough to be able to say, hey, I love Jesus, and that's why I can survive these cancer treatments? That he's the one that's getting me through. That's why I'm fighting for my marriage. He's the one that's getting me through my depression. Isn't that greater than any other thing that we could ever proclaim? I love Jesus, and he loves me, and I want you to know that. I mean, isn't that how we can move to another city? Donna moved all the way across the United States. I mean, I know that she had to rely on her faith to get her through. I know that because she had to leave all of us. But seriously, all the things that we go through. So trustworthy, vulnerability, humbleness, and passionate. People need to see that we're passionate, don't you think? Not superficial, performance-based passion. But I remember when I walked in with Kim to have her chemotherapy treatments, I remember how everybody run to her for encouragement. There she was sitting there for 3 hours getting her treatments into her arm. And she was exhausted and worn out. And guess what? They really were. They were coming to her. Oh, I just had to come by for a dose of inspiration today. I bet you all have had many, many times. And, you know, I don't know of all the personal ways that I can share that about different people. But I look at Chris, who's on with us today. And I remember last week I posted something about who inspires, encourages you. And everybody and Carrie said, every time I think about Chris Williams, I smile. I mean, is there anything greater to be said? That when people think of us, that our influence does that. And guess what? That can happen when you're depressed. You don't have to be all happy and perfect all the time. Hey, Pina from Canada, it's so good to see you. See, it's just where we are. It is being passionate that I know I have the hope of God in my heart, and I know I am passionate about the fact that I am going to get through what I'm going through. That today may not be the best day, but I'll get through it, and tomorrow just might be a better day. And in the midst of this, I'm going to grow in my knowledge of who God is, because that's going to sustain me. And as that sustains me, I'm going to be passionate about it, because women just cannot hush up when good things happen to us, right? We can't help but tell people. I saw that thumbs up, Joyce. I like that. I see that, Jen. Love that. So, ingredients of influence: trustworthy, vulnerability, being humble, passionate, and then last, was kind of close to number 2, but authentic. Authenticity is the root of the key influencing ingredients. Without it, there's no foundation for true connection and trust. Unless we're authentic, there's nothing true about it. I came to that knowledge many years ago when I realized that I didn't have any true friends, and the reason I didn't have any true friends is because I wasn't being true myself. How can I love Wendy when I don't really know Wendy? How can I love Joyce or Natalie or Kathy when they're not really letting me in? We have to let one another in and be authentic with who we are. Hey, Mumsy. So, ladies, those are the 5 ways that we can be authentic, and 5 ingredients. There are 4 levels to display it, and we'll talk about that later, but it's through the modeling, the motivating, the mentoring, and the multiplying. But when we get back after our talk, we'll talk about that a little bit.